Have you ever watched a movie which, let's say, is in English language, but then suddenly the characters go to another country? So you encounter a new perspective of a culture and the context that comes with previous setting. And what if that new country happens to be Spain? And you're now being exposed to a Spanish dialogue scene. If you only speak English, there is a tiny barrier between you and that scene. So you end up waiting for the subtitles to tell you what was said. But if it happens that you know both languages, you don't wait. You hear the Spanish, you understand the words, the tones, the little expressions, maybe even the cultural implication behind something that doesn't translate neatly. And there is something almost strange about realizing that the subtitles are no longer for you. And I also think the interesting thing here is that some directors would intentionally not subtitle another language to make their audience confused or simply keep the scene mysterious and suspicious, but mostly to make you feel excluded. But if you're someone who understands both of those languages, you suddenly occupy this weird position where you know something the director might not expect every viewer to know. You're essentially standing somewhere in between. You understand what one person is saying, but you also understand what the other person means. Not just literally, but culturally. You catch the little things that might disappear in translation. It's almost like you're standing between two worlds, and you get to have the privilege of understanding both of them. And this applies to literature as well. You see, I fell in love with reading things to English language. I've read a lot over the last couple of years. Probably like the biggest amount I've ever read in my life. And it made me realize what kind of books I like reading, what kind of writing I enjoy reading. And I even remember, was it like last summer break or even winter break, like during, I think it was during Christmas holidays actually, last year, I was reading this book, and the writing the writing is what got me. I'm not even joking. I started reading some of the paragraphs out loud and some of the dialogues just in order to like taste it on my tongue. I enjoyed the writing style so much. I would literally like reading it as a role play, like imitating different voices, just like experimenting with the dialogues. It was so great. And there are many books that I actually kind of like was invested more into the writing style than the actual story itself. But the point here is I fell in love with reading, particularly in English. But something happened a while ago. I decided to try. The key word here is try and read a book in Ukrainian because it's my native language, and I feel like I wasn't connected with it as much as I used to. And since I'm no longer having it in my life in a way, since I live far away from Ukraine now, and there's no one really I can talk to in Ukrainian, or I simply don't even like hear the language. So yeah, we kind of parted away, and I thought if I want to remember the language, I gotta read in it to kind of like remind myself and get back into that mindset. So, as I was reading that book, I realized it wasn't just hitting the same, not because it wasn't in English, but because I was reading a translation. You see, the book originally wasn't even written in Ukrainian. And so, as I was reading, I felt like I'm reading a story on a surface level. I was reading a story on a surface level while knowing there is another layer underneath that I'm not reaching. A translation can be incredibly good, but it's still an interpretation. Because you see, every translator gets to make decisions. One specific word can have five different variations of it, five different meanings and ways to say it. And there are some cultural implications that you simply cannot translate into another language. So it does create a sort of barrier. You don't get the full picture of the story, you don't get the full original story. It's simply someone else's reconstruction of those words. And the reality is, I ended up finding this book in English because it's the language I'm the most comfortable reading it. But this book wasn't even originally written in English, it was in German. And even though I did learn German for like 2 years back in primary school, I don't remember a single word. And I'm definitely not capable of reading a full book in German, even if I really wanted to. I mean, if I really wanted to, I could have tried. But again, I would have to use translator, so no. So there is simply no way of me getting to the original version of this book I was reading unless I learn the entire German, or at least a part of it that will give me the capacity to read in German. So I just think it creates this sort of chain of like this German original story going to the translator, and then this translator translating it in English or Ukrainian, no matter the language, and then only the story gets to me. Yeah, so I just feel like this simple concept of language barrier, not me getting a full experience of the book. I remember I had this teacher. He wasn't even our teacher, but he was my sister's teacher. Anyways, this guy would just hang out in our floor, sometimes substitute art teachers, and yeah, he was just there. He's just this character who would just spam on our floor, and yeah. But it was during one of our substitute lessons. He was just there looking after us. And I remember we were having a conversation about languages. And so there was this phrase that he said: knowing languages will get you places. And he, by that phrase, he simply meant that knowing languages means opportunities. When you know languages, you have a lot of accessibility to different jobs, building a career, and even just simply for traveling and being able to communicate with people from different cultures. I think languages, and it's not even me thinking, this is just a fact. Knowing a lot of languages nowadays is simply essential. It's simply essential for a lot of things. But I would like to take this phrase, you know, languages will bring you places, will get you places. It's a little different direction. A little different interpretation of it. I think languages can get you places that don't exist physically. They can take you into someone's literature, another country's history, jokes that don't work in translation, and essentially into a version of yourself that maybe only exists when you're speaking a particular language. Just think about it. Version of yourself that only exists when you're speaking a particular language. Even taking this example, of me loving to read, particularly in English language, I remember a while ago, like we're talking at least 5 years ago, I didn't give a damn about literature. I wasn't a reader. I mean, we had a literature in school. Actually, two types of literature. I didn't like reading, but I did fall in love with reading. I kind of like unlocked this part in me when I actually started reading in English and exploring the English language. You could argue that, well, you just grew up, your values change, your way of thinking changed. That's why you like reading now. But I do think that if I didn't know English and I would just continue reading in Ukrainian, I wouldn't be in the place that I am right now. I still wouldn't love reading and I wouldn't have done it in my free time, for my personal growth, as my personal interest, because I particularly started to love reading once I mastered English language. I don't want to say I mastered English language, but just you get the point here. I like even that Ukrainian book that I tried to read pretty recently, I didn't finish it. Not because, well, yeah, maybe because it was a translation that I didn't like. But even if I take an originally written Ukrainian book right now, I wouldn't enjoy it. And I'm not saying that like Ukrainian literature is bad. It's the language. It's a language that showed me a different path, different version of me. And I actually have another example of this phenomenon. I so I don't like talking in any language. I hate talking. I mean, I'm doing this video right now, this talkative video, just to get out of my comfort zone in the first place and just simply, yeah, develop this talking ability. I don't know. I think it would be really. I think it also will be interesting to just like look back into those type of videos in like a couple of years and just see where my mind was at and stuff. So yeah, I don't like talking. But the closest I've ever been to liking to talk and liked hearing myself to talk was when I was speaking French. When I was speaking in French, I still remember my French speaking exam and my French speaking mock exam as well. Like it was yesterday, guys. Even though I memorized like all of my answers for the questions, I still felt so in power when I was talking in French. And as I said, it was simply like the closest thing I've ever gotten to actually enjoying to talk. Yeah, I mean, French always fascinated me in that way. When I tell you, I would simply go to French lessons. I mean, they were obligatory, but you get the point. When I tell you, I was sitting in French lessons simply to hear my French teacher talk. I'm not even lying. She's amazing. I could hear her talk for hours. I'm nowhere being fluent in French yet, but once I get there, and trust me, I will, I will not stop yapping. You will not hear me shutting up ever. Like, if you're someone right now who is native in French, or like you have the level of French to be able to like talk, I wouldn't I wouldn't shut up in your place. I would be just yapping hours and hours because like talking in French is so hard. I said it. So new languages simply allow you to express a thought that you couldn't quite articulate before, or even open up a new skill and an experience. Because, and as I said, it opens up something in you, something new in yourself that you are able to experience only when you're speaking a particular language. So, do I consider myself a talker? A good talker? Absolutely not. I don't like to talk. That's simply a fact. But Did I feel the empowerment of speaking French in that exam room? Yes. Did I feel like the best speaking French person ever? Hell yeah. Oui, oui. But what happens when you lose a language? Does it mean you lose a part of yourself? But was this part ever even been there? Was it ever fully developed? I don't know. It's an interesting question to think about. You know, it made me think of Babel by Rebecca Kwong. Love that book. Absolutely love that book. It is emotionally torturing, but what can we say? You know, it just made me think of Griffin. He was taken away from China at a very young age, so he didn't get the chance to, fully kind of like absorb and immerse himself into the beauty of Chinese language. So eventually he just didn't belong to him anymore. You know, he was not able to even think in it anymore. Just wasn't part of him. The sunset is really beautiful right now. I mean, it's almost sunset. I just wanted to read you a passage. I mean, a paragraph from Babel. It's Griffin's part when he talks about losing his ability to speak Chinese. My fluency is largely artificial. I don't have memories in Chinese. I don't dream in it. He brought me here before I'd formed enough connections, enough memories. What's more, he was the only person I ever spoke Mandarin with, when my Cantonese was far better to begin with. And that's lost now. I don't think in it, and I certainly don't dream in it. And that's kind of like the truth, or kind of like the reality for me as well. I certainly did dream in Ukrainian, but that was long ago. Far long ago, and who knows? Maybe I won't be ever able to dream in Ukrainian anymore. I think what fascinates me most about languages, you think you're learning another way to say the same things, but then eventually you realize maybe they're not the same things at all.